So welcome to the Innovation Security Discipline in the Cloud Adoption Framework Secure Methodology. My name is Mark Simos. I'm Lead Cybersecurity Architect at Microsoft. Victoria?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Victoria Almazova, and I'm Senior Cloud Security Architect.
Cool. So let's dive right in. We hear a lot about DevOps these days, and two very, very important things coming together closer and becoming more of a team. It's very much a journey. What is called DevOps isn't always DevOps, we found, but the two teams coming together so that you can meet the needs of an application being responsive to the customer needs and rapidly releasing updates and fixes and adjustments to meet customer preferences and needs is an awesome thing. Super important for the application, so you don't have to wait 2-3 years or months possibly for a cycle to get an update out. And at the same time, the operations piece that's looking after the quality and the performance and making sure they're working within that rapid release cycle. Awesome stuff. We love to see that. But as you may guess by seeing the missing part of the heart there's something missing from the formula: security. We found that it's super important to make sure that as you look at this new way of developing things, this new way of innovating and meeting customer needs in a rapid way, that you're doing it in a secure way. We've seen many cases where at organizations that have various different DevOps teams, the teams that are going through the process and have security involved have very few security incidents and business interruptions and business impact from it. And the teams that skip security and just go straight there and don't bother with it tend to have a lot more incidents, a lot more interruptions, a lot more security issues, which can also grow to become larger security issues to the organization. Victoria, anything to add there?
Yeah, and I want to emphasize another thing that in the DevOps world, there is no space for the classical security. Like, we used to have the security somewhere, maybe as an postponed, and with the rapid speed of the development, it becomes even more critical to focus on the quality, which as well incorporates with the security, right? So that missing part of the hard security should be in place if you want to build innovation security. And yes.
I completely agree, and that's a perfect segue to the next slide. Because what we saw in the past, and Victoria, I know you've probably got plenty of war stories on how this plays out. Security is often treated as a quality function at the very end. And so after everything is done, all the coding and the testing is done, hey, we need to get security to scan this thing and approve it because we got to get it out. We're on a deadline, right? And then, of course, security isn't doing a good job. There's a lot of missed opportunities to fix things early, and it's expensive to fix things. They might just say, we'll take the risk and then have an incident. And so the waterfall approach really didn't do a great job. Sometimes it was integrated, but it really didn't do a great job of integrating security in. Whereas in the DevOps world, in the DevSecOps world, having security embedded in there is a necessity because of how fast things ship. And you want it to be a normal, natural part of the process. And so that's a very important shift that if you haven't already done it in your organization by being proactive, it's now necessary. Victoria, any kind of thoughts or stories there?
Yeah, what comes into my mind, like if you look back onto the waterfall model, at the end of just before the going to the production, like you, Mark, mentioned, the security suddenly shows up, and like devs and ops were not happy about that because that approach is kind of like usually it's a monolithic approach, because if the security comes in, they want to do the penetration testing, they want to do the security assessment, they want to look on all risks and have been there some risk mitigation. So it's kind of the big chunk of the work to do, right? And DevOps is not something new. Like it's already in the place for I think 10 years, and we saw the fights between dev and ops, and now we see that the DevOps works in a lot of the organizations, but there is still like, hey, how are we going to implement that security inside, or should we even care about? And imagine you have the development lifecycle with the release like the sprint every 3-4 weeks, and then suddenly security shows up and is like, hey, let's take another 2 weeks to do the penetration testing and see if what you're going to do is secure enough. So it causes additional frustration, friction, and as well additional business costs, right? Because if you don't come up with the new feature, your competitors will do that faster while you're stuck with the security review. So it becomes very costly as well, and I would say not scalable. And
Yeah,
another reasons like, yeah, go on.
Yeah, and it's not effective either because nobody's going to be friends and work with each other and consult each other and ask for help if, as a security person, you're left out of the process until the end. And then you're like, why did you make this decision, right? Or as the DevOps person, why did you tell me this now? Well, you didn't ask me earlier. And you end up in these sort of unproductive internal friction conversations and nobody wins, right? The business doesn't win, security doesn't win, IT doesn't win. Nobody wins when you have this arm's length. And so that's one of the things I love about the DevSecOps piece. It's one of the reasons why we chose the heart, because if you're working together as a team, everything's a lot better, right? And you can, okay, hey, we got, hey, bud, I saw that you're working on this. Let me know when you're in the design phase. I want to do a threat model and, go through that. Or, hey, we've got this great new tool that's going to find a bug, find security bugs for you and report them as a normal bug, and it fits your prioritization. So that's the thing that I really love about moving to that DevSecOps piece is it allows people to work together as, good humans as a single team.
And I want to add on the top of that, when we speak about the DevSecOps, you may have heard a lot about this concept of the shifting left, right? And when we talk about that, it doesn't mean that you need to take the security and just throw on the left side and like, hey, devs or hey, ops, now it's your turn to do the security. No.
So we're not doing the same annoying scan earlier?
No, we do, but it's kind of what I want to emphasize is that when we say shifting left, it's actually bringing, like you mentioned, bringing SME or the subject matter expert, or in this case, the security champion or the security expert earlier in the phase, like earlier already on the planning, on design, and working together side by side with the devs and ops instead of sitting in the security ivory tower and then make the decisions, right?
Absolutely. So let's take a moment and look a little bit more kind of why security is important and what we're seeing in the actual attacker world. And so, these two pieces very much correlate to sort of the technology and the process and that classic people process technology, composition of a system. And we're seeing a couple different things, and we're seeing this in some of the latest supply chain attacks that we see headlines for, and various other attacks. Some in the news and some not. But we're seeing both infrastructure attacks where the attackers are going after the workstations or the accounts or the build automation process itself and compromising that through the infrastructure, through administrator credentials, through unpatched servers and various different types of doing it. So they're actually going after the systems where the development is done and the release process is being done. But at the same time, we're also seeing process concerns, and we're seeing the attackers go after the actual development process and injecting code into it, et cetera. And we're also seeing a lot of vulnerabilities being generated that could be easily fixed, that cost a lot of money to fix later, but could be, quickly and easily and cheaply fixed earlier. So when you look at this from a security perspective, what are you trying to secure? Is it infrastructure or is it development process? The answer is yes, both. And anything to add, Victoria?
So you're telling me that it's not enough to secure my VMs anymore? I need to do something more, right? Oh gosh, yes, indeed. One of the primary attack vectors, what I have spotted recently, is indeed focusing on the development environment. And when I'm telling about that, I'm not thinking about just scanning the GitHub repositories for the leaked keys or the passwords. Yes, that's indeed. But like Mark mentioned, it's absolutely as well to inject the code in your repository in and compromise your build agents. So basically compromise CI/CD pipelines, because that type of the attack is more efficient. It stays under the radar, because you think that you have done the securing everything almost, and even checking sometimes the code, but indeed we need to focus a lot on securing pipelines and looking what exactly we are putting in the code. And I'm speaking, for example, about the third-party application, third-party libraries, you name it.
Yep, and it's a fairly complex process when you look at the development process. And an adversary could go and find a commonly reused open source component. We've seen issues where there's backdoors built into those that developers often use. We see it on the containers that the developers download for their container-based applications. And again, like you said, on the build server itself, and what is being told to be compiled, what actually gets compiled is not the same thing. So the attackers are extremely creative on this front, and we really can't afford to, unfortunately, ignore any of these aspects of it. We have to work through it step by step, and you can't do everything at once. You have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. But it really does have to be a comprehensive strategy. Now, we talked about the disadvantages of the waterfall model quite a bit, but we got to be careful that we don't put too much shade on the waterfall model, because there's a reason why we did that, and it's an important reason, which is we don't want to just take the code that we typed up really fast and go immediately to production with it. We want to make sure that there's equality there, which was really what the waterfall process was designed for. And so we don't want to completely lose that as we move to this much more agile way of doing DevOps. And so we've identified that there's really kind of two phases of an application. There's sort of before that first production release, before that kind of flag gets hit, and then there's after it, right? And so we look at those kind of differently. And the first production release, that sort of idea incubation, that we think we want to do this, we're going to bring this to market, we're going to test it on some pre-production data and go through that development process to kind of get it ready for release. We want to have an MVP before we go to release, but that MVP isn't just the business side, the development side. That MVP should cover all three bases: the development side, the business requirements; the security side, make sure it's meeting compliance requirements, safety requirements, basic security stuff, and minimum viable product. This isn't everything under the sun in security. This is the minimum. And then, of course, the operational piece. You want to make sure that, hey, this architecture will actually scale if we get 1 million users like we expect in the first year or so, right? And that's got the quality and performance footprint. It's expecting that. And so we want to make sure we hit the minimum for each of those. Now, we're not always going to get that right, but we want to make sure that we get a definition of the minimum so that we're not holding back release for the wrong reasons, but we're also holding back release if there's a reason to do it. And then that leads to then the dev operation. So after that first release, you then have the ability to fix it. And this is the magic of the DevOps process from my perspective, which is that you can continually update the plan, you can continually update the code, you can continually release it and fix things. And that includes security things. So you can rapidly fix, hey, you know what, in this release, we've got to fix these security bugs. They're backing up and they're bad. Or in the next release, we've got to add this feature. We're not going to be able to meet the market needs. Or, hey, you know what, if we don't shift to this new architecture because our user base is trending, we need to get to much more of a SaaS or PaaS architecture. Otherwise, our database is going to fall over, right? We need to be able to look at it from the perspective of sort of as a single team, looking at the hotspots, looking at what's most urgent, and then balancing those needs. And of course, integrating security natively into that process. So it's not the security dude at the end, but the security person is involved, or security expertise in the dev team is involved during the planning and thinking, is it time for a new threat model, or are we still good with the last one we did? During the development piece, making sure that we're generating bugs for security that look and smell and feel like a normal bug and can get fixed at the right time in the easiest way. And we're not generating a whole bunch of false positives. And then, of course, all the other tools integrated throughout, which we'll cover in the next slide a little bit. Anything to add, Victoria, before we kind of go to the continuous improvement?
I was thinking that it may sound like that we are overwhelming the DevOps process itself, right? It sounds like that we are adding the security there, and logically you may think that, okay, it's going to take longer time, it's going to cost us more. So actually, if you look on this on the practice, and if we make the security part as a part of the development, it becomes clear over the time that that investment is worth, because you kind of put the security in every single step by making the small impact on the development process, on the design process, but at the same time, you're getting the better results and faster feedback loop, right? So this is what comes into my mind, because I don't want to scare you away with the sentence, let's put everywhere security now, and then it's okay. So how much time it's going to take for me to create that MVP then? No, it's going to take a bit longer, but not so much, I would say, comparing if you would add the security at the end of the cycle. Am I wrong?
Absolutely correct. And this is a huge part where continuous improvement, not just of the applications individually, but also the process. As you learn, hey, we did an MVP where we defined it this way for the first application and all the way through the 5th or 10th. And we've realized that this security thing doesn't add a lot of value, but there's another way of doing it that's a lot more efficient. We can change that out for all the future apps and then backport it to the first 5 or 10. So we can always change this process because we're iterating on the DevOps piece and we're developing new apps all the time. So this whole process is a learning process, and you start small. You start with a minimum viable product. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you, Victoria. We do not want to overburden this with we're just going to bring all the existing tools in there. No, we're going to bring these into the process that exists and fit them into the CI/CD pipe and fit them into the way people think about it, fit them into planning. Okay, you do personas. Love it. One of your personas should be an attacker. You just added new data to it. That's great. How's this person going to use it? How's this person use it? How's the attacker going to make money off of that? Right? So you want to bring it in and use the language and the process of the development process itself.
Yeah, it sounds great, and I want to look on from the practical perspective. Like now we looked from the high level, what is a DevSecOps, and what does it mean by shifting left? And if we will take the example from the implementation part, we need to remember that the DevSecOps is the same as the DevOps. It's a lot about the people, processes, and the tools, and this is where we need to look into our development cycle, which is like planning, developing, committing the code, building, testing, and going to the production and learning from our operation via monitoring and so on. So that means practically on every single step, we can add some of activities which are mentioned here, or all of them. It depends on the maturity of the organization. So let's take the example. Once you just on the planning sprint or on the planning session, you can think immediately about the threat modeling, right? And as well, the peer review is not something new. It's fully adopted by the developers, but you add the sum of the salt, so to say. You look as well from the security perspective. And once you're committing the code to the repository, this is where you could focus on the biggest issues, or what I call the low-hanging fruits, like the dependency management. So how do you do the dependency management? Are rules, third-party application libraries, are they secure enough, or should we scan them automatically? And this is something that you build into the repository, and you can make it non-intrusive, like at the beginning, especially by giving the warnings, and later by failing the builds. And the process goes and goes. Like on the build and test, we add the infrastructure scanning, because we have the infrastructure as a code, so we can treat that from the security perspective in the similar style like we do with the regular code or the application code. And once we go to the production, there are sometimes the cases, especially if you are delivering important functionality or the important business service, it's worth to stop and do the penetration test. And on the operation, again, that's not something new. This is something what we need, we can take from the DevOps. We learn, we prepare us for the potential security findings, and this is very important to emphasize the culture of the blameless postmortems. So all of these steps, what you see here, it doesn't mean that you need to implement all of them immediately. Pick and choose some of them which you find the most important right now in your current security maturity level, and step by step you're adding more and more tools, adopting the new processes, because they obviously take the time as well.
Yeah, and we purposely picked these to be the ones that are the easiest to integrate and have the most positive value from a security standpoint. And like everything else, we will be continually iterating on this and looking for new tools and new techniques to add to it. All of the Microsoft documentation sites, for those that aren't aware, are actually something that you can propose edits for. So we're always looking to make this better, and we are really excited to help get you started on this. And any last comments before we kind of wrap up the innovation security?
Nothing except that don't be afraid to try and fail and learn again, because that's obviously the process of the DevOps, and it's the process of the modern development.
Awesome. Thank you, Victoria, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.